Mara here is still a work in progress.
What problem does your project solve?
My father introduced me like I was a problem he hadn't solved yet. "This is Mara," Gerald Holt said, lifting his glass with that calm, practiced smile he used on boardrooms and charity galas. "She's still finding her direction." The private dining room went politely quiet, the kind of quiet that pretends to be respectful while it sharpens its teeth. The city glowed beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Houston spread out like a promise I'd never been invited to claim. Crystal clinked. Someone chuckled, small, safe, just enough to agree with him without looking cruel. I felt the familiar heat crawl up my neck. Not anger, not embarrassment exactly, more like the old instinct to shrink, to make myself easier for them to ignore. My mother, Elaine, patted my arm as if I were a nervous child at a recital. My brother Cameron didn't even look at me. He was too busy playing the room, wearing his engagement like a trophy. And across from him sat Vera Lynn, his fiancée. Perfect posture, soft lipstick, eyes that didn't drift when people spoke, eyes that stayed and measured. She smiled when she needed to, but it didn't reach all the way through. I'd promised myself I would survive tonight. Smile, nod, leave before the knives came out. I should have known better. In this family, the knives were part of the table setting. The restaurant staff moved like ghosts, silent, efficient, trained to make the wealthy feel like the world ran on their comfort. Leather chairs, dark wood, a faint smell of old oak and expensive cologne. It wasn't a dinner, it was a stage dressed up as a celebration. Cameron leaned back, one hand draped possessively over Vera's chair. "So, Mara," he said, like he'd just remembered my name, "what are you up to these days? Still doing the computer thing?" "The computer thing?" my mother echoed, and her laugh was light enough to float. Her little project. My father took a sip of wine. "It keeps her busy," he said. "A hobby can be healthy, especially when you're not built for the grind." They smiled at each other, a quick, satisfied exchange. This was what they'd come for, proof that Cameron was the success story, the one who made them look right, proof that I was the cautionary tale, the one they could point at to scare other people's children into obedience. I kept my face still. I watched the condensation slide down my water glass and told myself not to breathe too loudly. My hands were steady, even as my stomach tightened into a hard knot. Vera's gaze moved to me, then to my father, then back again. It wasn't pity, it wasn't curiosity the way my family used it, like a flashlight searching for weakness. It was focus. "So, what does your project do?" she asked, casually, as if she were making conversation. "What problem are you solving?" Cameron laughed. "Babe, don't encourage her. She'll talk your ear off." I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because it wasn't true. I didn't talk at all around them. I'd learned what happened when I did. Vera didn't laugh with him. She tilted her head slightly. "No," she said, still gentle. "I mean it. Who pays for it? Why would they choose it over anything else?" For the first time all night, the air changed. Even my father paused, just a fraction, like he'd stepped into a room and realized someone else owned it. I met Vera's eyes. My heartbeat stayed slow, disciplined, the way it had to be. "Not yet," I told myself. "Don't say a name. Don't open the door." I set my fork down carefully, as if the sound might give me away, and I forced my voice to stay calm. "It's just something I'm building, quietly." Vera's smile didn't widen, it sharpened. "Quietly," she repeated, tasting the word like it meant more than I had intended. And I understood in that instant that she wasn't asking to be polite. She was hunting. By the time the appetizers arrived, my family had already decided what role I was supposed to play. The silent one, the odd one, the cautionary tale. Cameron speared a piece of tuna like he was closing a deal. "Honestly, Dad," he said. "I keep telling her if she just took a normal job for a year, she'd be fine. But she loves the struggle. It's like a personality trait." My mother's smile was small and pleased. "Some people enjoy detours," Elaine said. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at Vera, like she was offering a private warning about the kind of woman her future husband's sister was. My father nodded with that tired authority he used when he wanted to sound generous. "She's always been independent," Gerald said. "Stubborn, really. We've tried to help, but you can't help someone who won't accept reality." There it was, the family anthem. We tried. She refused. Therefore, anything that happened to me was my fault. I let my eyes drop to the plate. I focused on the clean white of the porcelain, the way the candlelight softened the edges. If I looked up, they'd see something. If I reacted, they'd win. Cameron leaned forward, warming to his favorite sport. "Remember when she interned for Jake's firm?" he said, grinning. "She spent the whole summer answering phones and acting like she was saving the world." I heard the laughter around the table, polite, coordinated, exactly like my father's earlier chuckle. A performance. I hadn't interned at Jake's firm. I'd volunteered to help a friend's office while I was finishing a contract at night. But facts never mattered when a story made me smaller. My throat tightened anyway because the memory his joke dragged up was real. 2 summers ago, my parents hosted a family weekend at their lake house. They didn't tell me the dates. I found out when Cameron posted a photo on Instagram. Sunset behind them, champagne in hand, the caption bragging about blood and legacy. I stared at that picture in my apartment, still wearing my work hoodie, and I felt something in me go quiet. Not sad, not shocked, just confirmed. Confirmation came again at a 4th of July barbecue. My father stood beside the grill, surrounded by his friends from the energy world, and he told a story about me like it was a joke he'd been saving. "Mara wanted to start some little software thing," he said, flipping burgers like he was flipping my life. "I told her, 'Sweetheart, if you want to play entrepreneur, at least marry someone who can cover the bills.' The men laughed, the women smiled politely. My mother laughed the loudest, like she was proud of how well my father could humble me in public. After that, Cameron sent me $500 with a text that said, 'Buy something nicer. You look like you're going through a phase.' He didn't ask if I needed help. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just wanted me to look less embarrassing when I existed near their name." Back in the private dining room, Vera didn't laugh as loudly as the others. In fact, she barely laughed at all. Her gaze kept flicking to me, then away, as if she was trying to place me into a category that didn't exist in her world yet. "So you're building something," she said again, quieter now, like she didn't want my family to hear the seriousness in her tone. "Do you have a team?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because in my pocket, my phone buzzed once, short, sharp, and I knew exactly who it was without looking. My COO didn't text me during dinners, not unless something was about to change. The vibration hit my thigh like a warning shot. I kept my face neutral, the way you do when you've spent years learning how to survive a room full of people who want you smaller. Cameron was still talking, something about real careers and grown-up schedules, but his voice slid into the background as I pushed my chair back. "Excuse me," I said lightly, like I was stepping away to fix lipstick instead of my entire nervous system. My mother nodded, satisfied. In her mind, I was retreating because I couldn't keep up. My father didn't even glance up. Vera's eyes followed me anyway. The hallway outside the private dining room was dim and cool, lined with framed black and white photos of old Houston, oil men and skyscrapers, and smiling faces that had never worried about rent. I walked fast, heels quiet on the carpet, until I found the restroom and locked myself into a stall like it was a bunker. Only then did I pull out my phone. One message from Mateo. "Founder verification request. Term sheet ready. They want confirmation before midnight." My stomach flipped, not from fear, but from the strange, sharp thrill of timing. I stared at the screen as if it might change. It didn't. The words stayed there, plain and brutal in their simplicity. I closed my eyes and breathed through my nose, slow and controlled. This was the moment my whole year had been built around. Not this dinner, not my father's smug smile. This. But the problem was the same one it had always been. If Gerald Holt knew what I was building, he wouldn't congratulate me. He'd claim me. He'd rewrite my story until it belonged to him. He'd call it our family's innovation and start making calls like he owned my code. He'd done it before, tried anyway. Years ago, when I was still naive enough to bring an idea home like it was good news, he'd listened for 5 minutes, then leaned back in his chair and said, "So, who's funding you?" "Me and a couple pilots." He smiled the way a man smiles when he spots a weakness. "Good. Then you won't mind if I mention it to a few people. The right people. If this thing is real, it should be attached to our name." When I'd said no, his face went cold. "Don't be dramatic," he told me. "If you want to play entrepreneur, you need adults in the room." After that, I learned the beauty of silence. Stealth mode wasn't a strategy at first. It was a shield. I splashed water on my wrists at the sink, watching my reflection. Calm face, steady eyes. A woman who looked like she belonged anywhere, even when she didn't. As I stepped back into the hallway, I heard my father's voice around the corner, low, confident, on a call he thought no one could hear. "I'm telling you, it's basically done. Vera's people understand the market. We just need a solution that optimizes grid performance, real-time, secure, scalable. If we lock that in, the contract's ours." My steps slowed. Grid performance, real-time, secure, scalable. Those weren't buzzwords. Those were my words. The ones I'd written into pitch decks at 3 in the morning. The ones my team had turned into something that actually worked. My pulse stayed steady, but something inside me snapped into place like a magnet finding metal. He wasn't just mocking me at dinner. He was hunting the same thing I was, and he didn't even know it. I walked back to the table with my shoulders relaxed and my smile rehearsed. The conversation shifted as I sat down, like everyone had been waiting to see if I'd return with my tail tucked. Vera didn't give me time to settle. "Okay," she said, still soft, still polite, but her eyes had sharpened into focus again. "You said you're building something quietly. Stealth, right?" My mother laughed. Oh, she loves sounding mysterious. Vera didn't look at her. "What's the company called?" she asked me directly. I picked up my water glass, letting the cold condensation calm my fingers. "I don't share that," I said. Vera nodded once, like she'd expected resistance. "Does it have grid in the name, or Aurora?" The air changed so fast it felt like someone had opened a door to winter. Cameron's grin faltered. My father's glass paused halfway to his mouth, and I realized I wasn't the only one holding my breath anymore. My father recovered first, because men like him always do. He set his glass down with a soft, deliberate clink and smiled at Vera like she was a bright student who'd gotten carried away. "Vera, sweetheart," Gerald said, voice warm with manufactured patience. "You're giving her too much credit. Mara's always had imagination. It's charming, but the real world doesn't run on apps." My mother laughed, grateful for the rescue. "Exactly. She gets obsessed. It keeps her busy." Cameron leaned forward, eager to reclaim control. "Babe, trust me, she's been launching something since college." They wanted the room back. They wanted me back in the little box they'd labeled harmless, unserious, safely beneath them. Vera didn't blink. "Apps?" she repeated, still polite. "No, what she described isn't an app, it's infrastructure." Her gaze shifted to my father. "You said you're negotiating a contract that needs real-time optimization, security, scalability. That's not imaginary. That's expensive." Gerald's smile tightened at the edges. You must have misheard me. I didn't, Vera said, and her tone never rose. That was the scariest part. So let's keep it simple. Mara, Aurora Grid, is that the name? My heartbeat stayed slow, disciplined, like I was walking a narrow bridge in the dark. I looked down at my napkin, then back up. I didn't glance at my parents. I didn't give Cameron the satisfaction of seeing me flinch. Yes, I said. One syllable, clean. The silence that followed wasn't polite. It was stunned, heavy, almost physical. Vera exhaled, like a puzzle piece finally clicked into place. I knew it, she murmured. Then she reached into her clutch and slid her phone onto the table, turning the screen so everyone could see. A headline, a photo of a server rack blurred into a moody background, a name typed in bold, Aurora Grid, and underneath it, the kind of language my father pretended to speak fluently. Stealth energy startup, real-time grid optimization, major Series B in motion. Gerald stared at the screen like it had insulted him personally. Cameron's face went pale. That's not her, he said too quickly, the way liars rush to fill silence before truth can settle. Vera's eyes flicked to him. Actually, she said, we've been trying to meet the founder for months. Your sister fits the profile, the discretion, the way she answers questions. She turned back to me. Mara Holt is the founder. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Why didn't you tell us? Elaine's voice trembled like heartbreak, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She was already trying to rewrite the narrative into something that made her look like the supportive mother of a genius daughter. I didn't move. Gerald cleared his throat, that old reflex to reclaim authority. If this is true, he said, slow and controlling, then it's reckless. You're going to get yourself sued. You should have come to me. I could have protected you. Vera let out a quiet laugh, not cruel, just surprised. Protected her? She tilted her head. Gerald, the company you're chasing for your contract is her company. She tapped the screen once. Aurora Grid is the solution you were bragging about in the hallway. Gerald's jaw tightened. Cameron shoved his chair back slightly, eyes darting. That's not her. Vera, you're mixing things up. But the damage was done. The air had shifted the center of gravity. The air felt different now, like the ceiling had lifted. Vera's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then looked at me with something that wasn't pity at all. Recognition. They want founder verification by midnight. That's your message, isn't it? My mother's lips parted, stunned that Vera was speaking my language instead of theirs. I lifted my chin. Yes, I said. Gerald opened his mouth, probably to demand, to command, to reclaim. I stood before he could. I placed my napkin on the table, careful and precise, and looked at my father for the first time all night. I didn't hide, I said, calm as glass. I chose who deserved to know. Then I turned to Vera. Excuse me, I added, still polite. I have a call to take. And as I walked away, I heard something I'd never heard at a Holt family table. Silence that belonged to me. The elevator ride down felt unreal, like the building was dropping away from the version of me they'd kept trapped for years. I stepped into the lobby with my phone already in my hand, thumb hovering over Mateo's message. Founder verification before midnight. My reflection in the glass doors looked composed, almost elegant. Inside, my ribs were too tight, my breath too shallow, as if my body hadn't caught up to what my mouth had just done. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. The valet line shimmered under warm lights. I walked a few steps away from the entrance, far enough that I couldn't hear the muffled laughter or silence behind the doors. I called Mateo. He answered on the first ring. Mara? I'm here, I said. Send the verification package. I'll sign tonight. There was a pause, the kind that comes right before good news lands. They're ready, he said. But there's something else. The buyer on the enterprise contract, the one Gerald Holt's been chasing, they just asked if they can bypass his firm and speak directly to Aurora Grid. They want the solution, not the middleman. For a second, I just stood there, letting the words settle. So that was the real universe, not the one my family narrated at dinner, where my life was a hobby and my future was a punchline. The real universe didn't care about Gerald Holt's voice, or Elaine's smile, or Cameron's curated success. It cared about performance, about results, about who actually built the thing everyone needed. "I'll take the meeting," I said, and my voice didn't shake. "I'll set it," Mateo replied, "and, Mara, proud of you." I ended the call and stared at the skyline. My hands finally loosened. I felt light in the strangest way, like I'd been carrying a backpack full of stones without realizing it until someone cut the straps. "Hey." Vera's voice came from behind me. She'd followed me out, heels clicking softly on the pavement. Up close, her composure was the same, but there was something sharper around her eyes, something that looked like disgust, not at me, but at what she'd just witnessed. "I'm sorry," she said, and she meant it. "I didn't know they treated you like that." "They didn't treat me like that," I corrected gently. "They trained me to accept it." Vera nodded once, absorbing that like a fact, not a story. "Cameron's inside trying to spin it. He's calling you family brilliance now. Your mother's crying. Your father is—" She hesitated, then let out a quiet breath. "He's angry because he can't control it." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. The doors swung open again. Cameron stepped first, jacket unbuttoned, smile already pasted on like we were walking into a photo op. My parents followed, a half step behind him, faces arranged into something that could pass for concern. "Mara," my mother said, rushing forward, "sweetheart, why didn't you tell us? We would have supported you. We're your family." My father didn't bother with warmth. "This is bigger than you understand," Gerald said, voice low. "If you're negotiating contracts at that level, you need professional protection, you need a structure, you need—" "You," Cameron cut in quickly, "you need us, connections. We can help you do this right." There it was. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We're sorry." Not, "I didn't realize." Just the instinct to grab the steering wheel now that the car was moving. I looked at all of them, people who shared my blood but had never treated me like I belonged, and felt something calm settle over my chest. Not rage, not grief, clarity. I'm not giving anyone access. Not to my company, not to my work, not to my life. Elaine's eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face like a practiced costume. "Mara." "No," I said, still quiet. "You don't get to laugh at me for years and then call it pride when it becomes valuable." Cameron's smile twitched. "You're being dramatic." Vera made a small sound, almost a scoff, and Cameron flinched like he'd been slapped. I turned back to my parents. "If you want a relationship with me, it starts with respect. Private, not performative. No jokes, no speeches, no using me as a story to impress your friends." I paused, letting the words land. "And if that's too hard, then we don't have a relationship. It's that simple." My father's mouth tightened. For once, he had nothing to say that could fix it. My mother's voice got thin. "You're really going to do this? Walk away?" I nodded. I already did. I stepped toward my car, then stopped and glanced back one last time, not at my family, but at Vera. "Thank you," I said. She held my gaze. "Don't thank me, just don't go back." I got in the car, shut the door, and for the first time in years, the silence around me felt like mine. If you've ever been mocked for building something quietly, if the people closest to you made you feel small because it kept them comfortable, tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories where patience turns into payback, make sure you like, subscribe, and stick with Stillwater's Payback.